The lucky bid. The auction house on Omega Station smelled of ozone and desperation. Rhiannon Drake stood at the back of the crowd, trying not to fidget with the cred chip in her pocket that represented 5 years of dangerous courier runs and careful saving. Her dark eyes scanned the holographic display showing the next lot, a Corvette-class light freighter that had definitely seen better days. Next up, Lot 117, announced the auctioneer, an Andarian whose translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns. 1 Mark IV Corvette, moderate damage to outer hull, all systems operational. Starting bid at 40,000 credits. Rhiannon's heart leaped. The starting price was lower than she'd expected. Maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. After years of piloting other people's ships, she was ready for her own vessel. Even a beaten-up Corvette would do, she had enough engineering experience from her military days to handle the repairs. The bidding started slowly. A few traders made half-hearted offers, but the visible damage to the hull seemed to be scaring off serious buyers. Rhiannon waited, watching the price climb gradually. 45,000. 50,000, 55,000. 65,000 credits, called out a Meridian merchant, his cybernetic eye whirring as it analyzed the ship's specs. Rhiannon took a deep breath. It was now or never. 75,000 credits, she announced clearly, drawing surprised looks from the crowd. It was almost everything she had, but something about this ship called to her. The auctioneer's antenna twitched with interest. 75,000 from the human pilot. Going once, going twice. 80,000, growled the Meridian merchant. Rhiannon's heart sank. She had maybe 5,000 credits in reserve for repairs and supplies. She couldn't go higher without leaving herself completely broke. But then she remembered all those nights sleeping in cramped crew quarters on other people's ships, all those years of taking whatever job she could get because she didn't have her own vessel. 85,000 credits, she called out, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. The merchant turned to stare at her, his cybernetic eye scanning her threadbare flight jacket and worn boots. After a long moment, he shook his head slightly and turned away. 85,000 credits, the auctioneer repeated. Going once, going twice, sold to the human pilot. Relief and excitement flooded through Rhiannon as she made her way to the processing station. The documentation was handled quickly, and within an hour she stood in docking bay 23, staring up at her new ship. It looked even rougher up close. The hull bore obvious signs of weapons fire, and some of the armor plating would need to be replaced entirely. But the basic structure was sound, and the engines, from what she could see, were a solid design. This was a ship built to last. The airlock hissed open at her touch as the computer recognized its new owner. The interior lights flickered to life, revealing a surprisingly well-maintained cockpit. Rhiannon settled into the pilot's seat, her fingers running over the familiar controls. Despite the wear and tear, everything seemed to be in working order. That's when she noticed something odd on the sensor readouts. A faint energy signature was registering in the cargo hold, something the manifest hadn't mentioned. Drawing the old military pistol she still carried, Rhiannon made her way cautiously through the narrow corridors. The cargo hold door slid open to reveal a large cylindrical container that definitely hadn't been in the auction listing. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with a soft violet light. Rhiannon approached carefully, her trained eye recognizing it as some kind of stasis pod, and an incredibly advanced one at that. Before she could decide what to do, the pod systems suddenly activated. The violet patterns intensified, and the surface became transparent, revealing its occupant. Inside floated a humanoid figure with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer with starlight. Her features were eerily beautiful, yet clearly not human. The pod seal broke with a gentle hiss. As mist swirled around the opening chamber, the figure's eyes snapped open, revealing irises that swirled like spiral galaxies. She stepped out with otherworldly grace, her long silver hair drifting as if she were still in zero gravity. "You have claimed this vessel?" she asked in perfect standard, her voice carrying harmonics that made Rhiannon's skin tingle. Yes. I'm Rhiannon Drake. And you are? I am Lyra Voidweaver, last of the Starborn. She straightened, her bearing suddenly regal. And by the ancient laws of my people, you are now bound as my protector. Before Rhiannon could process this declaration, the ship's proximity alerts blared to life. Multiple vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace nearby, their weapons already charging. They have found me, Lyra said calmly. We must leave. Now. Rhiannon glanced between the mysterious alien and the flashing warning lights. This was definitely not what she'd planned when she came to buy a ship. But as the first enemy vessel locked its weapons on them, she realized her choices were limited. Hold on to something, she said, already running for the cockpit. She had wanted adventure, after all. She just hadn't expected it to come with quite so much baggage. The ship's engines roared to life as Rhiannon initiated emergency launch procedures. Whatever she had just gotten herself into, there would be time for explanations later. Right now, they needed to survive. Hunters in the dark. Rhiannon's fingers danced across the controls as she guided their ship through a series of evasive maneuvers. Behind them, 3 sleek vessels painted in crimson and black pursued with relentless determination. Their weapon systems hummed with deadly energy. Care to explain why we're being chased by military-grade warships? Rhiannon called over her shoulder. Lyra had taken the co-pilot's seat, her movements precise as she studied the ship's systems with surprising familiarity. They are the Crimson Syndicate, Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the ship's violent jerks. Led by Commander Thex Ravengar. They seek to harness the power of my people's technology for their own gain. A blast rocked the ship, and Rhiannon swore under her breath. The shields were already at 60%. And the part about me being bound to protect you? The Guardian's Bond is an ancient practice of my people, Lyra explained, her starlit eyes fixed on the tactical display. When a Starborn awakens from stasis, they form a unique connection with their rescuer. The bond is both physical and metaphysical. Metaphysical? What exactly does that? Rhiannon stopped mid-sentence, staring at her arm. Faint patterns of light, similar to the markings that shimmered across Lyra's skin, had begun to appear beneath her sleeve. The bond is manifesting, Lyra said softly. It will grant you abilities beyond normal human limitations, but it requires acceptance. You must choose to embrace it. Another blast rattled the ship. Warning lights flashed across the console as their shields dropped to 40%. Can we focus on staying alive first? Rhiannon muttered, banking hard to avoid another volley. Through the view screen, she could see they were approaching an asteroid field. It was risky, but their pursuers' larger ships would have trouble following. As she prepared to make the turn, Rhiannon felt a strange sensation, like someone else's thoughts brushing against her mind. I can help, Lyra said, extending her hand. The bond allows us to share consciousness, to move as one. Let me guide you. Rhiannon hesitated for a moment, then took Lyra's hand. Immediately, her world expanded. She could feel Lyra's presence in her mind, centuries of spatial awareness and navigational instinct flowing into her consciousness. Together, they guided the ship into a complex series of maneuvers that no human pilot could have managed alone. Their smaller vessel wove through the asteroid field with impossible grace, while behind them, one of the Syndicate ships clipped its wing on a massive rock and spun out of control. The other 2 fell back, unwilling to risk the same fate. That was incredible, Rhiannon breathed, still feeling the echo of their shared consciousness. The patterns on her arm had grown brighter, pulsing in sync with Lyra's own markings. The bond will only grow stronger, Lyra said, watching the lights dance across Rhiannon's skin. But it comes with a price. The Syndicate will never stop hunting us now. They know you're becoming something more than human. As if to emphasize her point, a new alert blared through the cockpit. The remaining Syndicate ships had called for reinforcements. 6 more vessels were emerging from hyperspace, including a massive dreadnought that could only belong to Commander Ravengar himself. "We need somewhere to hide," Rhiannon said, checking their fuel levels. "Make repairs and figure out our next move. Any suggestions?" Lyra was quiet for a moment, considering. "There is a place. A hidden space station called Shadow's Respite. It's run by a smuggler named Jean Blackthorne, no relation to the Syndicate. She's helped others escape them before. Can we trust her?" "Trust is a luxury we cannot afford," Lyra replied. "But she owes a debt to my people. And the station's security systems were built using starborn technology. We will be safer there than anywhere else in this sector." Rhiannon nodded, already plotting the course. Through their growing bond, she could sense Lyra's unease. There was more she wasn't telling. But they had few options, and the Syndicate ships were closing fast. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Rhiannon caught her reflection in the viewscreen. The glowing patterns had spread further across her skin, creating intricate designs that seemed to tell a story she couldn't yet read. Whatever this bond was, whatever she was becoming, there would be no going back. "You're taking this remarkably well," Lyra observed, watching her. "Most humans would be terrified by such changes." Rhiannon gave a short laugh. 5 years ago, I was a military pilot with a promising career. Then I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, spoke up when I should have stayed quiet, and ended up blacklisted. Had to start over from nothing." She engaged the hyperdrive, watching the stars stretch into streaks of light. "After that, I learned to adapt. To take whatever life throws at me and make it work. And now life has thrown you an alien fugitive and a mystical bond." "Could be worse," Rhiannon said with a slight smile. "At least my new ship came with an interesting co-pilot." Through their connection, she felt Lyra's amusement, tinged with something deeper, respect, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. As they traveled through hyperspace, Rhiannon found herself studying the alien woman's profile. Despite her otherworldly beauty, there was something haunted in those starlit eyes. Whatever burden Lyra carried, whatever secret she was keeping, Rhiannon had a feeling she would soon be sharing it. The patterns on their skin pulsed in unison as Shadow's Respite grew closer. Somewhere behind them, Commander Ravengar and his Crimson Syndicate were no doubt already plotting their next move. But for now, they had escaped. For now, they had time to breathe, to plan, and to discover exactly what this bond between them would become. Sanctuary's price. Shadow's Respite looked like a collection of shadows dancing among the stars. The space station was built from salvaged ship parts and ancient technology, its dark metal surface absorbing nearby light rather than reflecting it. As they approached, Rhiannon noticed the patterns on her arm resonating with strange symbols etched into the station's hull. "Starborn script," Lyra explained, sensing her curiosity through their bond. "Warning glyphs, meant to ward off those who would abuse our technology." "Lot of good that did," Rhiannon muttered, thinking of the Crimson Syndicate's pursuit. She guided their ship toward a barely visible docking port, following the encrypted coordinates Lyra had provided. A voice crackled over their comms, speaking in a language Rhiannon had never heard before. Before she could ask, the translation flowed into her mind through their bond, another unexpected benefit of their connection. "Your credentials are recognized, Starborn," the voice switched to standard. "Welcome to Shadow's Respite. Jean awaits you in the Twilight Chamber." The docking procedure was automated, their ship guided by invisible hands into a secure bay. As they powered down the engines, Rhiannon noticed something odd about the other vessels docked nearby. They all bore subtle modifications, technologies that seemed to pulse with the same energy as Lyra's markings. "Jean doesn't just help people escape the Syndicate, does she?" Rhiannon asked. "She's collecting Starborn tech." "Very observant," Lyra acknowledged. "Jean Blackthorne is complicated. She believes she's preserving my people's legacy, but her methods are not always aligned with our principles." They were met at the airlock by a pair of guards whose armor seemed to shift and adapt to the station's lighting. The guards led them through winding corridors that defied normal spatial geometry, passages that should have intersected somehow never met, and distances seemed to stretch and contract unpredictably. The Twilight Chamber lived up to its name. The vast circular room was lit by an artificial twilight that cast everything in perpetual dusk. At its center stood Jean Blackthorne, a tall woman with midnight black skin decorated with cybernetic implants that glowed with familiar starborn energy. "The last starborn graces my humble station," Jin's voice carried both warmth and calculation. "And with a newly bonded guardian, no less. The patterns suit you, Rhiannon Drake." Rhiannon tensed. "You know my name. I make it my business to know everything about those who interest the syndicate." Jean circled them slowly, her augmented eyes studying their bonding patterns. "Though I admit, I'm curious why Ravengar himself leads the hunt. What makes you so special, little star?" Through their bond, Rhiannon felt Lyra's sharp spike of anxiety. There was something more here, something beyond simple technological preservation. "We need sanctuary," Lyra said carefully. "And repairs for our ship." "Sanctuary is expensive," Jean replied. "But perhaps we can help each other. Your ship's data core contains information I'd find valuable, sensor logs, navigation data, particularly from your time in stasis. Give me access, and you'll have your sanctuary." Before Lyra could respond, Rhiannon felt a warning pulse through their bond. The patterns on her arm flared, and suddenly she could see beyond the visible spectrum. The guards had shifted positions, weapons charging. More importantly, she could see the energy signatures of dozens of stasis pods hidden behind the chamber's walls. "You're not preserving their legacy," Rhiannon said, the truth dawning. "You're collecting them. Keeping them in stasis until you can find a way to exploit their power." Jin's smile turned predatory. "Clever girl. The bond is making you quite perceptive." "Yes, I have others of Lyra's kind here, sleeping, waiting. But none of them have formed a successful bond. You too are unique. You sold information to the syndicate," Lyra accused, her voice tight with anger. "That's how they found us so quickly. Business is business, my dear. Ravengar pays well for leads on starborn technology. But don't worry, I'm not giving you to him. You're far too valuable here." The guards raised their weapons, but Rhiannon was already moving. The bond between her and Lyra pulsed with power, their shared consciousness guiding them in perfect synchronization. Rhiannon's enhanced reflexes let her disarm the nearest guard while Lyra raised her hand, the air around them shimmering with energy. "The stasis pods," Lyra commanded. "Release them." Jean laughed. "You don't have the power to force me. Your abilities are still developing, and my station's defenses." She never finished. The patterns on Rhiannon and Lyra's skin blazed with brilliant light, their combined power reaching out to touch the ancient technology woven throughout the station. Warning klaxons blared as stasis pod after stasis pod began to activate. "You understand so little," Lyra said, her voice echoing with power. "The bond doesn't give us abilities, it awakens what was always there. Humanity carries echoes of starborn DNA, buried in their genetic code. That's what the syndicate discovered, what they're truly hunting. Not our technology, but the power to awaken humanity's hidden potential." Chaos erupted in the chamber as more guards rushed in, but they were too late. The station's systems were responding to Lyra's commands, and through their bond, Rhiannon could help direct that power. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, trapping Jean and her forces away from the awakening stasis pods. "We need to get them out of here," Rhiannon said, already planning escape routes through their shared consciousness. "But the syndicate will be here soon," Lyra finished. "Jin's betrayal means we've lost our sanctuary, but we've gained something more valuable, the truth. And allies." As if in response, the first of the hidden starborn emerged from their pods, their own patterns lighting the twilight chamber like newborn stars. Through their bond, Rhiannon felt Lyra's fierce joy mixed with sorrow. Her people were not extinct after all, merely scattered and sleeping. But there was something else, a deeper truth still hidden. As they began organizing the rescue of the awakened Starborn, Rhiannon caught fragments of it through their strengthening connection. Something about the origin of the bonds, about why her DNA contained those ancient echoes. The mystery would have to wait. Right now, they had a station full of newly awakened Starborn to protect, a furious crime lord to escape, and the Crimson Syndicate undoubtedly closing in. Just another day in the life she'd chosen when she placed that winning bid. The awakening. Alarms screamed through Shadow's respite as Rhiannon and Lyra led the rescued Starborn through twisting corridors. Through their bond, they coordinated the evacuation with seamless efficiency, their shared consciousness allowing them to track multiple escape routes simultaneously. Jin's forces are trying to override the bulkhead controls, one of the rescued Starborn reported. She had introduced herself as Vena, her silver skin bearing patterns that pulsed with fierce crimson light. And long-range sensors detect multiple syndicate ships dropping out of hyperspace. Rhiannon felt Lyra's mind racing alongside her own, calculating possibilities. "We need to split up," they said in unison, then shared a brief smile at the synchronization. "The rescued Starborn can take the emergency pods," Rhiannon continued. "Small vessels, harder to track. We'll draw their attention with our ship." "No," Lyra's response came both verbally and through their bond, carrying fragments of memory that made Rhiannon's head spin. "We need to reach the station's core. There's something here, something Jean doesn't even know she has." Before Rhiannon could ask what she meant, the deck beneath them shuddered. Through their enhanced senses, they felt the vibrations of dock clamps engaging. The syndicate had arrived. "Vena, get everyone to the escape pods," Rhiannon ordered. "Plot random trajectories, then rendezvous at the coordinates we discussed." She turned to Lyra. "What's in the core?" Instead of answering directly, Lyra shared a memory through their bond. Rhiannon gasped as ancient knowledge flooded her consciousness, images of vast ships that sailed between galaxies, of humans and Starborn living together in harmony, of a terrible choice that led to their separation. "We didn't give humanity powers," Lyra explained as they ran toward the core, their patterns lighting the darkened corridors. "We helped them remember the powers they already had. Your ancestors were our equals, partners in exploring the cosmos. But something went wrong, a threat so terrible that both our peoples agreed to forget." They reached a sealed door covered in complex Starborn script. As Rhiannon's patterns resonated with the ancient technology, she understood what the glyphs meant, the Genesis archive. Jean built her station around it without knowing what it was, Lyra said, placing her hand on the door. "A backup of our shared history, and the key to reawakening humanity's true potential. The Syndicate found fragments of this knowledge in their research, but they don't understand what it really means." The door responded to their combined energy, sliding open to reveal a chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. At its center floated a crystalline structure that pulsed with familiar light, the same energy that flowed through their bond. Suddenly, Rhiannon's patterns flared with warning. Through their connection, she felt hostile presences approaching from multiple directions. Jin's forces had broken through the bulkheads, and Syndicate troops were boarding the station. "We don't have time to," Rhiannon began, but stopped as Lyra stepped into the crystal's light. Energy surged through their bond, and more memories cascaded through their shared consciousness. She saw the truth of humanity's origins, not just cousins to the Starborn, but the same species, separated by choice and time. The powers awakening in her weren't alien at all, but a birthright hidden in human DNA, waiting to be remembered. "That's why the bond worked so perfectly between us," Lyra said, her voice echoing with power. "Why you adapted so quickly. Your ancestors helped create this technology, Rhiannon. It's as much yours as it is mine." The chamber's lights pulsed in warning as weapons fire echoed through nearby corridors. They were out of time. Through their bond, Rhiannon felt Lyra's desperate need to protect the archive, to prevent its power from falling into the wrong hands. The Genesis archive can't be moved, Lyra said quickly. But it can be downloaded, integrated into our bond. The knowledge would be safe within our shared consciousness until we can find others ready to remember the truth. What happens to us if we do that? Rhiannon asked, even as she moved to join Lyra in the crystal's light. How much power can two people safely contain? Lyra's response carried equal parts fear and hope. I don't know. This was never meant to be done by just two people. The original plan required thousands of bonded pairs to share the load. Another explosion rocked the station. Through their enhanced senses, they felt Jin's forces approaching from one direction while Commander Ravengar himself led a syndicate team from another. They were about to be caught between two enemies, with the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Rhiannon looked at her arm, where the patterns had grown to cover most of her skin. 5 days ago, she had been a simple pilot looking to buy a ship. Now she was faced with a decision that could change the course of human history, if it didn't kill her first. Through their bond, she felt Lyra's absolute trust in her, matched by her own growing feelings for the starborn woman. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Do it, Rhiannon said, taking Lyra's hand. Download the archive. Let's show them what humanity has forgotten how to be. As their patterns blazed with newfound power, the Genesis archive poured its ancient knowledge into their shared consciousness. The chamber filled with blinding light just as both doors burst open, Jean and Ravengar's forces converging on the scene. What happened next would change everything, but first, they had to survive the next 5 minutes. Stardance. The Genesis archive's power surged through Rhiannon and Lyra's bond, transforming their connected consciousness into something vast and ancient. Memories of 1,000 generations cascaded through their minds, star maps drawn before Earth had named its first constellations, songs sung in languages that predated human speech, and secrets that both species had chosen to forget. Stop them. Jin's voice seemed to come from a great distance. The archive's power can't be contained by just two beings. Commander Ravengar's forces opened fire from the opposite door, but the energy blasts dissipated against a shield of pure light emanating from Rhiannon and Lyra's intertwined patterns. Their newfound power rippled through Shadow's respite systems, awakening dormant starborn technology throughout the station. You understand nothing, Lyra's voice echoed with the wisdom of ages. This power was never meant to be contained. It was meant to be shared. Through their enhanced bond, Rhiannon felt the truth of those words. The Genesis archive wasn't just a repository of knowledge, it was a key, designed to remind both species of what they'd willingly forgotten. She raised her hand, watching as patterns of light danced between her fingers. Humanity chose to seal away their powers, she said, the knowledge flowing naturally now. Not because they were dangerous, but because they weren't ready. The same choice the Starborn made, to wait until both species could evolve enough to handle it responsibly. Which is exactly why we need to control it. Ravengar stepped forward, his cybernetic implants glowing with stolen Starborn energy. Imagine what humanity could become with proper guidance. We could reshape the galaxy. That's what they were afraid of, Jean added, her own augmentations pulsing in resonance with the archive's power. Why they locked it all away. But we're ready now. Give us the knowledge, let us help distribute it properly. Rhiannon felt Lyra's amusement through their bond. Together, they raised their hands, letting the archive's energy flow outward. But instead of attacking, the light touched each person in the chamber, human and cybernetically enhanced alike. Where it passed, patterns briefly shimmered on their skin, echoes of the power that lay dormant in their genes. Feel that? Lyra asked. The potential inside you? That's what the Syndicate's experiments detected, what Jin's technologies tried to unlock. But it can't be forced or controlled. It has to be remembered, accepted, understood. Through their shared consciousness, Rhiannon directed the energy to reveal more, showing everyone present visions of the past, of humans and Starborn working together to explore the cosmos. She felt their shock, their awe, their sudden understanding of how much they'd forgotten. The archive wasn't a weapon, she explained, the ancient knowledge flowing through her. It was a promise. A reminder left for when both our species were ready to remember. Not to conquer or control, but to help each other grow. The station shuddered as the power continued to build. Warning klaxons blared as systems began to overload. They had minutes at most before Shadow's respite tore itself apart. "It's too much power," Jean warned, her augmentation sparking. "You'll destroy us all." "No," Lyra said calmly, squeezing Rhiannon's hand. "We're going to share it. The way it was always meant to be shared." Together, they reached out through the station's systems, connecting with the escaped Starborn in their pods, with the crews of the Syndicate ships, with every being in range. Through these connections, they began distributing the archive's vast knowledge, not as raw power, but as understanding, letting each person receive only what they were ready to comprehend. Rhiannon felt the change rippling outward like waves in a cosmic ocean. Some, like Ravengar, received only the smallest glimpse of the truth, enough to understand the magnitude of what they'd been tampering with. Others, particularly among the Starborn, remembered more of their heritage. And a few, those whose hearts and minds were truly ready, began to manifest their own patterns of light. The process took only moments, but by the time it was done, everything had changed. The Genesis archive, having served its purpose, began to fade. The crystalline structure dissolved into motes of light that danced through the chamber before disappearing. "What have you done?" Ravengar demanded, though his voice had lost its edge of command. "We've given everyone a choice," Rhiannon answered. "The same choice our ancestors made. The knowledge is out there now, scattered among thousands of minds. Some will ignore it, some will seek to understand it, and some will be ready to help others remember. But it can never be weaponized or controlled by any one group again." Through their bond, she felt Lyra's approval and something more, a deep personal connection that went beyond their shared power or ancient heritage. The patterns on their skin had stabilized into intricate designs that marked them as the first of a new generation of guides, teachers for those who were ready to remember. "The station's breaking up," Jean announced, her augmentations flickering as Shadow's respite systems began to fail. "We need to evacuate." "I suggest you all run," Lyra said calmly. "We have a different path to take." As Jin's forces and the Syndicate troops fled the disintegrating station, Rhiannon and Lyra stood in the archive chamber, their patterns growing brighter. Through their enhanced senses, they could feel others out there, humans and Starborn alike, beginning to remember, to awaken, to seek understanding. "Ready for another adventure?" Lyra asked, both aloud and through their bond. "There are others who'll need our help remembering who they really are." Rhiannon smiled, feeling the warmth of their connection and the excitement of the path ahead. "Well, I did want my own ship. Though I wasn't expecting quite so much extra with the purchase." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment." Hand in hand, they made their way back to their ship as Shadow's respite began its final collapse. The patterns of their bond lit the way, promising not an ending, but a new beginning, for themselves, and for both their species. As they broke free of the disintegrating station, Rhiannon felt a sense of perfect rightness. She had come looking for a ship and found so much more, a partner, a purpose, and a chance to help humanity remember its forgotten heritage among the stars. "Where to first?" she asked as they entered hyperspace, leaving the wreckage of Shadow's respite behind. Lyra's response came with a smile and a pulse of joy through their bond. "Wherever the patterns lead us. After all, we have a galaxy full of people starting to remember who they really are. And something tells me they're going to have questions." Their ship vanished into the depths of space, leaving behind a legacy of awakening that would gradually spread throughout human and Starborn civilization alike. The auction house on Omega Station had advertised a simple ship for sale, but Rhiannon Drake had won something far more precious, a chance to help write the next chapter in the story of two species remembering their shared destiny among the stars.